Consider these two men, Ronald and Richard. One's a janitor and one is an investment banker. From this information, you would think it'd be easy to tell who between them is a philanthropist. The answer may change the way you think about money and wealth. Ronald Reed is an actual person. In Wikipedia, he was mentioned as a philanthropist, investor, and a gas station attendant. That's right, all of that. Upon his death, his family discovered that he was a millionaire, where he'd left $8 million in his will, which left everyone in shock. How can a janitor accumulate $8 million quite silently without anyone noticing? No, this is not a story about a criminal mastermind. In this video, I will take you on a journey that will transform everything you believe about money and wealth. This journey will either shatter your perception or reinforce what you thought you already knew but never truly understood well enough. What I will share with you will be easy to comprehend but difficult to master. And you will realize how much you don't know from what you thought you already knew. So keep watching. Richard Fosconi was a high-powered former vice chairman of Merrill Lynch. He was set to retire at 40 and made a fortune in the financial industry. He was shortlisted in one business magazine's 40 under 40 list, and life was good. He had two mansions, one said to have a glass roof on top of an indoor pool. Somehow, a few months around the time Ronald passed away, Richard declared bankruptcy and see himself fighting off 2 foreclosures of his home. How is this so? Well, Richard borrowed heavily to expand his lavish home, which costed more than $90,000 a month in mortgage repayments. And then the 2008 financial crisis happens.
Lehman Brothers is going bankrupt, and financial markets from Asia to Europe are doing their utmost to prevent Monday from turning from dark to black.
It doesn't leave much for us to wonder anymore now from this. Now let's talk about Ronald. He did not win any lottery nor inherited any money he generously gave away. All he did was save what little he could and invested in blue chip stocks. And then he waited days, months, years, and decades on end as what someone would call tiny savings eventually compounded to more than $8 million. There's a secret here that many of us often overlook in what Ronald did that led to his wealth. Before we get there, let me set a context for you. At this point, perhaps you notice how things are difficult financially. You just realize you're behind on bills, unexpected expenses, a family to feed, mortgage repayments that just increased after the Fed announced an interest rate hike, which is an unsurprising response to the inflation figures that often leaves us with a sinking feeling that lasts indefinitely every time you think about it. Now the question comes, when will we see the light at the end of the tunnel? Maybe none of what I just said applies to you, in which case, in this context, you've proven my point in that money is different to everyone. What's crazy to you is not crazy to others. To illustrate, if you grew up to an employed father, you'd think about money very differently to a person who grew up to a father who runs a business. A man who has a monthly wage thinks about cash flow differently to a sole trader. Your grandparents who lived through the Depression would not have the same idea of risk the same way you would growing up in economic prosperity. You see, your perception about money is very much shaped by your experience more than anything else. It determines your decisions, risk, and wealth. What I'm trying to do here is to help you find a middle ground. In the story between Ronald and Richard, maybe you don't want to be more like Richard, but more like Ronald. That's a great start. But it's more important to understand that their story tells us a very important lesson to financial success, which is that financial success is not necessarily determined just by what you know, but more by how you behave. And how you behave doesn't have to be determined by your experience. Financial success is not a hard science, but a soft skill. Importantly, It is not an event, but a consistent habit. A little story about energy resources. Around the 1900s, coal was still the primary source of energy. People were afraid coal was going to run out. And then we discovered oil. In the 1970s, just like with coal, the same fear arose with oil. People thought oil was going to run out too. It was quite plain to see that the general global economy was growing and demand for oil was staggering. Fortunately, we did not run out of them. But the reason for that was not just because we found more oil or got better at extracting them from the earth, but it's because people understood the power of efficiency and applied it much better than they used to. The world grew its energy wealth not by harnessing or extracting more energy, but instead decreasing its energy needs. Since 1975, US oil and gas production increased by 65%, while conservation and efficiency has more than doubled. From this example, it's quite easy to see which one mattered more. The same could be said about wealth. You can earn more income, but it doesn't amount up to much if your consumption is greater than your savings. In this scenario, finding more oil was rather out of our control because there were so many factors to consider. Furthermore, those factors are often shrouded in uncertainty, but not working on improving efficiency that was well within our control. So what can we learn from this? To conclude, how many of us can truly admit that we need less than we think? Now, I'm not telling you to live off the land somewhere off grid, but I want you to realize the gap between what you want and what you have is created from teaching yourself to be happy with less money. The bigger this gap is, the less you have to worry about trying to earn more than necessary. Not because you shouldn't achieve more in life, but it's more reasonable to control what's already within your grasp, which is your spending habits, and to save. Big investment returns and fat paychecks are brilliant when they can be achieved, and not everyone can achieve them. But the fact that there's so much effort put onto one side of the finance equation and so little put onto the other is a lost opportunity for most people. Past a certain level of income, what you need is just what sits below your ego. Put it this way, one of the most effective ways to increase your savings isn't to increase your income, but to increase your humility. And I'm quite well aware that it is a constant struggle against your humanly desires and wishing for people to turn their heads as you drive a Ferrari or getting compliments for the big house you just bought. If you look at people with enduring personal financial achievements, they're not necessarily the ones with high incomes, but they are the ones who tend to not care about what others think of them.
My life would not be happier, in fact, it'd be worse if I had 6 or 8 houses or, a whole bunch of different things I could have. So having everything I have, you can't have more than that, and that doesn't really make it makes a difference up to a point.
Now, we've arrived at the end. Was this all really a secret? This is all what Ronald did. This is a silenced truth, an unpopular path. And as I've said, it's easy to educate ourselves on this, but it's really difficult to master and practice. Money relies more on psychology, more than financial knowledge. You now know the easiest way to build wealth, but with the added advantage of a psychological perspective, which is to do it with patience and humility. If you haven't started this journey, now is the time. I hope this video benefit you, and I wish you good luck. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Thanks for watching. Izzy signing off.